They say that in the warp, nothing ever truly dies. Echoes linger, not just of screams or laughter, but of entire tragedies, sung in choruses that are never meant to be heard by mortal ears. Among these ghostly resonances, one stands apart, feared even by those who have faced demons bare-souled and returned. They call it the Choir of Cinder. Not a creature, not a voice, but a collective dirge made of fire and sorrow. A sound that flows through the immaterium like a molten river of loss, burning its presence into the minds of any who hear it. It is music, yes, but it is also agony. Grief made song, pain made harmony. There are no official records, no sanctioned truths, no data slate that dares give the choir a classification. But its name is whispered by voidfarers, rogue traders, and those psychers unfortunate enough to stumble across its melody in the dreaming tides of the warp. And when they speak of it, they do not speak long. Their eyes glaze over, voices falter, and sometimes, if one listens close, a faint hiss follows the silence, like ash settling on the soul. This is not merely a warp anomaly. It is not a mere phenomenon. It is the warp's mourning given form and frequency. It is the Choir of Cinder. The first known accounts of the Choir of Cinder do not come from high-ranking inquisitors or vaunted librarians of the Adeptus Astartes. They come from broken Vox recordings, found on derelict vessels drifting through dead systems, half consumed by warp burns and atmospheric collapse. The earliest of these, believed to be from a minor freighter known as the Sable Grace, is little more than static and a trembling voice repeating the phrase, "They're still singing in the fire." No crew was ever found. The ship had been declared lost near the warp-torn fringe of the Caradim Expanse, a region known for temporal slippage and spontaneous combustion of non-shielded compartments. It was not a place of significance. Until then. From there, more fragments emerged. Stray Vox captures from destroyed explorator ships, psychic echoes recorded by astropathic choirs that were later purged for incoherence or madness, and feverish accounts from warp-touched survivors who could no longer differentiate music from memory. What made these reports terrifying wasn't just their consistency. It was that none of them could be traced to a singular point of origin. The choir seemed to appear anywhere, always uninvited, always at the edge of perception, like a melody hiding beneath silence. One of the more infamous early encounters was documented during the ill-fated Pale Halcyon mission, a pilgrimage ship that veered off course during a warp storm and emerged weeks later with most of its passengers dead and its Geller field emitter scorched from within. The survivors, 7 in total out of nearly 12,000 souls, spoke of glowing figures in the corridors, not demons, but shapes of ash and fire that harmonized with the screams of the dying. They described the song as simultaneously divine and annihilating, a voice from beyond the veil that offered peace only through surrender to flame. Those survivors were quarantined and later executed after one of them began humming the tune incessantly, causing an outbreak of spontaneous combustion among Schola staff. Another terrifying testament came from the renegade psyker known only as Mirelon, a self-proclaimed listener of cinders who was captured by the Inquisition after a series of warp-tuned sermons in the underhives of Necromunda. Mirelon spoke of the choir as a cosmic lament, claiming that it sang the funerals of worlds not yet dead. His mind, riddled with psychic scar tissue, could not be fully probed even by sanctioned telepaths. But when his body was incinerated, standard protocol for rogue psychers, his pyre let out a shrieking harmony that shattered 10 meters of plasteel wall and deafened 3 Adeptus Arbites on duty. The recording was sealed under inquisitorial authority and has never been released. But not all encounters ended in death. Some ended in devotion. Among rogue trader dynasties, there are tales of navigators hearing the choir and returning changed, their third eyes permanently veiled, not in blindness but in reverence. One such account, attributed to the Orast's line, tells of a matriarch who vanished for 3 decades into the Empyrean and returned with skin like charcoal and eyes weeping luminous tears. She claimed the choir was not an entity, but a memory of every world ever burned, every child ever orphaned, every cathedral ever collapsed in fire. She spoke its name as one might speak of a long-lost lover, and within the year, every member of her household was dead, some by flame, some by their own hand. Across centuries, these fragments, scorched audio, half-mad diaries, echo-haunted voxcasts, built a myth too consistent to be coincidence. The choir of Cinder was not an isolated event. It was a pattern, a dissonant note in the music of the warp, recurring across time and void, leaving behind nothing but ashes and the faintest hint of harmony, like the last whisper of a hymn long silenced by fire. To speak of the choir of Cinder is to confront a horror not only of vision and touch, but of sound, and far beyond any natural conception of music. The choir does not merely sing, it resonates, invades, and consumes. Its manifestations are not constrained to the physical world, nor even to the psychic. They occupy a third liminal space where thought, feeling, and memory are reduced to ash and remade in cadence. The choir's sound is, by all accounts, not a product of any known vocal mechanism or instrument. It is a confluence of vibrational phenomena that harmonizes across multiple frequencies simultaneously, often described as existing in and out of time. Some survivors say it sounds like a cathedral organ burning, others like voices screaming in joy and sorrow so profound that it cannot be distinguished, and some, with horror hollowing their tone, have compared it to the echo of one's own death, sung by the stars themselves. Psychers describe it differently. Those attuned to the warp hear more than just auditory notes. They experience tactile feedback. Skin feels scorched by invisible heat. Minds are drawn to impossible memories, the fall of a city they've never seen, the weeping of a mother who never existed, the final sigh of a world engulfed in solar fire. It is not uncommon for such individuals to bleed from the ears, mouth, and eyes when exposed to the choir's full resonance. In certain rare cases, entire brains have liquefied within their host skulls while smiling blissfully, their last expressions frozen in ecstasy and horror alike. It's as if the choir simultaneously offers unbearable pain and intimate beauty, a crescendo of destruction so perfect it seduces even as it slaughters. What makes the choir more terrifying than any demon's howl or a psyker's scream is its subtlety. At first, it is barely noticed. A distant hum, a note of warmth in the static of the vox, a melody caught in the rattle of bulkhead vibrations. But it grows. Always. Never abruptly, but with a slow, devouring grace. When the choir truly arrives, it does so with a harmony so vast and layered it challenges perception itself. Some accounts speak of hearing not only sound, but emotion, as if the choir doesn't just emit frequencies, but projects anguish, regret, awe, and longing, making those within its reach feel as if they were burning for every mistake they had ever made. Ships that pass through regions where the choir is active often suffer inexplicable system failures related to resonance overload. Vox units pick up ghost hymns. Auspex arrays display sonic feedback as visual hallucinations, entire corridors filled with flickering figures of ash dancing to music only the damned can hear. Some tech priests have speculated that the choir may be manipulating subatomic vibrations, weaponizing emotion itself as a tool of entropy. Even hardened iron hands have been documented tearing out their own audio receptors in response to exposure. Yet despite the destructive potential of its presence, there is beauty. In hushed corners of the Imperium, in hidden archives and heretic song vaults, there exist musical transcriptions made by those obsessed with the choir, tablatures written in warp notation, harmonic diagrams that resemble sacred geometries twisted in flame. These forbidden symphonies, when performed, have caused spontaneous combustion, suicide, and rapture. And yet, some still pursue them, as if the choir holds a truth so profound it is worth dying to hear. Or perhaps the seduction is simpler, to witness the warp singing something so perfect, even if it means one's soul is incinerated in the process. The choir's soundscape is thus not mere noise. It is an emotional architecture, an auditory virus seeded in the psyche of reality. It has no language, yet speaks directly to the heart of every listener, bypassing logic, culture, even species. Orcs die laughing to its chorus. Eldar weep without understanding. The choir is the same for all, because pain, like flame, is a universal tongue. It doesn't ask permission to enter. It simply begins. And once it does, no silence is ever the same again. There are few names more cursed among the Ordo Malleus than Galath Prime, not for the demons it spawned, nor for any ancient Xenos evil awakened, but for the song that destroyed it. Once a thriving hive world known for its vast manufactoria and shrine cathedrals, Galath Prime was reduced to a blackened husk in under 48 hours. No orbital bombardment, no tyrannid biofleet, no uprising or virus bomb. Just a voice, just a song, just the choir of Cinder. What little we know of the Galath event comes from the shattered remnants of a Mechanicus survey probe, picked up months later in the far orbital drift of the system. It contained partial Vox recordings, sensor data corrupted by heat distortion, and a single clear log, the final Voxcast of a civilian broadcast station, transmitting an emergency plea that dissolved into harmonic screaming. The choir had arrived. What followed was unlike any warp incursion the Imperium had ever documented. Witness accounts, few and scattered, described how the very air began to hum, vibrating with unnatural rhythm. Windows cracked. Vox units emitted unintelligible hymnals in languages no one could place. Priests heard their sermons answered by disembodied choirs of flame. And then the fires began. Not from explosives or weapons, but from within. People burst into flame mid-step, faces frozen in rapture. Promethium storage didn't ignite. It boiled and sang. Cathedrals melted, their stained glass flowing like wax, forming images of mournful saints and burning angels before collapsing in on themselves. It wasn't destruction, it was transformation, as if the planet was being rewritten in music and fire. One of the most tragic documents recovered is the death thought of an Imperial Psychana adept named Seraph Vals. Her encoded final transmission spoke not of horror, but of awe. The song is the shape of grief. It sings of loss so profound it must consume all memory. It burns because nothing else is pure enough to carry its weight. Her brain combusted moments later, but her words became the seed of radical doctrine among certain fringe Ordo Malleus inquisitors. The Adeptus Astartes of the Ember Vow chapter were deployed in emergency response during the final hours of Galath Prime. None returned. A single battle barge, the Lament of Unity, was later found adrift, its hull scarred with burn patterns resembling Holy Scripture. Aboard, the bodies of the Astartes were found kneeling, their ceramide armor scorched black, helmets removed, eyes open and glassy, not with fear, but with tear-streaked reverence. One of them, Chaplain Hospitaller Arvedan, had carved a crude score into the deckplate beneath his gauntlets. No words, just notes, impossible to sing without rupturing vocal cords. Several choir priests tried. None survived. The Inquisition declared Galath Prime lost to warp contamination and authorized exterminatus, though there was little left to burn. The choir's aftermath left a planet of statues made from melted sorrow, its atmosphere shimmering with phantom harmonics for decades. No life remained, but neither did silence. Explorator drones deployed in later centuries reported residual resonance so powerful it caused machine spirit fugue and self-immolation among servo skulls. One Magos declared the planet a warp echo node, a fixed harmonic well where the Empyrean bled through the materium, centered upon a planet's memory of its own death. The loss of Galath Prime shifted Imperium doctrine on warp anomalies profoundly. Where once such events were dismissed as localized psychic storms or minor demon incursions, the choir forced a re-evaluation. It was not a foe to be fought, but a condition of reality, like grief, like entropy, like flame itself. The ecclesiarchy began quietly expunging records of choir-like manifestations. The Officio Assassinorum filed sealed reports describing the necessity of silencing individuals who attempted to replicate the song. Even among the black ships, the choir became taboo, a whisper that no psyker dared echo for fear the song might hear and answer back. Galath Prime didn't just die. It was mourned by the warp itself, not with pity, but with poetry. Its last moments weren't screams, but verses sung in the key of extinction. A planet became a requiem, and all who heard its final note became part of that song forever. In the shadowed chapels of desolate shrine worlds and deep within the forgotten libraries of excommunicated cardinals, there are whispers of a cult unlike any other, the Ashen Saints, flame-touched heretics who venerate the choir of Cinder not as a curse, but as divinity incarnate. To them, the choir is no malevolent warp anomaly, but a manifestation of the Emperor's final lament, a holy hymn sent to cleanse the sins of a rotting Imperium through sacred immolation. They do not fear the choir's song. They long for it. They sing it in dreams. The origins of the Ashen Saints are lost in Apocrypha, their emergence seemingly scattered across disparate systems in waves of flame and ecstasy. Each time the choir manifested, a few would survive, not broken or mad, but reborn. Their eyes would glow with embered light, their tongues speak in harmonics no human vocal cord should permit. These were not simply survivors, they were converts, and they began to teach. The cult's first sacred text, the Cinder Psalm, was penned by a former ecclesiarch choir master who survived the immolation of Jared's spire. His hands burned black, voice lost forever. He wrote with blood and ash. His opening line, "The voice of the God Emperor is fire, and we are the incense of his breath." To the Ashen Saints, flame is purity, suffering is beauty. The choir is the instrument of transcendence, its song a sacrament. Their rites are horrifying in their passion. Ritual incinerations conducted to harmony, choir masses held in collapsing buildings set alight, the inhalation of ground bone and sacred ash to receive divine melody. The most devout among them are called the Emberborn, and they undergo a ceremony known as the veiling, where their vocal cords are burned away, replaced with vox shrines implanted in their throats, forever resonating with echoes of the choir's hymn. They speak only in fragments of song, each word a chorus. Though denounced by the ecclesiarchy as a schism of the worst heretical strain, the Ashen Saints remain difficult to exterminate. They do not hold territory. They do not form armies. They bloom like firestorms across the stars, erupting wherever the choir has sung. After the Galath Prime incident, sightings of robed figures in ash-colored vestments were reported across 3 sectors, each preaching of a coming requiem that would bathe the Imperium in redemptive cinders. The cult does not seek dominion. It seeks conclusion, a final, harmonious end. Inquisitorial efforts to root out the cult have met with haunting difficulty. Interrogations are often useless. Captured saints dissolve into flame at the moment of questioning, their ashes left arranged in spirals resembling sound waves. Others self-immolate while singing, spreading the choir's resonance before combustion. Some acolytes report that saint gatherings leave a lingering hum in the air for weeks, enough to disrupt Geller fields and drive low-level psychers into seizures. One particularly infamous operation, the Solstice Cinder Purge, ended in tragedy when an entire inquisitorial strike force joined the saint congregation mid-assault, laying down their weapons and chanting before their bodies combusted in synchronous rapture. Even more disturbing are reports of symbiotic harmonization. Adeptus Ministorum Vox chapels mysteriously tuning into faint choir echoes during sermons, entire schola choirs falling into harmonic trances when exposed to saint scripture. It's as if the choir's song is not just heard, but remembered, an echo buried in the soul of humanity, waiting to be reignited. The Ashen Saints claim that this is proof of the choir's divine origin, that it sings from the Emperor's own pyre, and that all humans carry within them the ember of that great fire, waiting to be kindled. They sing not for rebellion, not for revenge. They sing because they believe they must. Because to them the flame is not an end. It is a chorus rising to the heavens, one voice at a time. There are those among the heretical and the unshackled who claim that the choir of Cinder is not a purely warp-born phenomenon. These radical thinkers, most hunted or silenced by now, whisper of an origin rooted not in demonic emergence, but in ancient technology, Xenos, or perhaps even pre-Imperial human constructs, forgotten and buried beneath millennia of sanctioned ignorance. It is a theory that balances on the knife edge of blasphemy and insight, that the choir is not a voice of the warp, but an echo of something older, something created. Among the Ordo Xenos, scattered and forbidden texts make mention of harmonics weaponry, technologies wielded by extinct races capable of manipulating the emotional and physical properties of matter through sound alone. The Eildari once spoke of mourning blades, sonic artifacts that could fracture a soul and leave the body untouched. Though no examples remain, their ancient lament for the fall implies tools of psychic resonance far beyond anything the Imperium has dared to imagine. Some speculate that the choir might be a corrupted remnant of such a device, adrift in the warp after the collapse of an Eildari craft world, amplified over millennia into an autonomous phenomenon. But the darker theories lie with the Necrontyr. Before biotransference rendered them soulless, there are apocryphal suggestions of a caste devoted to psychoacoustic dominion, scientists and philosophers who explored sound as a manipulator of mind and matter. One dead language recovered from a scorched tomb world includes glyphs resembling both musical notation and brainwave patterns, hinting at a forgotten science where harmonics and neural architecture were one. Some radical Xenorites propose that a long-lost Necron construct, perhaps a failed Satan weapon, was jettisoned into the warp, its purpose broken, its song malformed, becoming what we now call the choir. There is, too, the horrifying possibility of human origin. Before the Age of Strife, mankind wielded technologies that even the Mechanicus cannot replicate: psychosonic architecture, resonant memory storage, and mind-affecting frequencies encoded in noospheric light. One forbidden cogitator fragment, unearthed beneath a dead ocean on Vantar Thur, referenced something called the Canticum Mortis, the Song of Death, a weaponized lullaby designed to pacify rebellion by inducing euphoric surrender through controlled neural overload. The choir, if connected, may be a degraded echo of that device, endlessly looping through the warp, amplified by its own destruction. Others go further still. Some theories posit a Xenos race long extinct, beings composed of harmonic energy now remembered only through corrupted myths and archaeotech ruins that resonate when touched. The choir in this vision is not a song created, but a species grieving. A mass extinction event that fused its racial psyche into the warp itself, creating a migratory, semi-sentient echo, a requiem with no singers left to own it. These ideas remain blasphemous. No Magos Dominus would admit to entertaining them. But the Inquisition has not purged all such documents. Instead, it catalogs and hides them in vaults beneath void-shrouded fortresses, often guarded not by men, but by silence, the kind so deep one might begin to imagine music in the emptiness. Perhaps because even they fear that if the choir is not demonic, if it is technological, constructed, then it might be replicable, usable. Worse still, if it has origin, then it has purpose. And if it has purpose, then it has intent. Intent implies agency, and agency implies that the choir sings for a reason. If the choir of Cinder is not some ancient machine echo or the detritus of a forgotten Xenos race, then perhaps it is something far worse, a demon not yet fully born, This is the theory most aggressively pursued by the Ordo Malleus, and it carries a chilling logic. In the maddening whirl of the warp, emotion becomes energy, thought becomes matter, and belief becomes entity. Over millennia, enough death, fire, grief, and awe could do more than echo. It could gestate. The demonic hypothesis asserts that the choir is an emergent warp intelligence, a proto-god of resonance, fire, and lamentation. Not aligned to any known ruinous power, though it shares echoes with Slaneshi, sensory manipulation, sentient transformation, and even the obliterative entropy of Nurgle's acceptance. Some theorists argue that this divergence marks it not as a lesser demon, but as a newborn power, one still in the throes of defining itself. A godling not of excess or decay, but of mourning. A warp being birthed by accumulated sorrow, whose hymns are its infancy cries. This possibility haunts the Inquisition more deeply than any known chaos threat. Chaos gods are at least understood in their archetypes: lust, rage, rot, change. But what of a god of catharsis, of burning grief? Such a being would draw power not from perversion or war, but from every moment of loss in the galaxy. Every mother screaming over her child's corpse, every guardsman watching his regiment melt beneath the guns of heretics, every ecclesiarch seeing faith falter as cathedrals fall. In a galaxy of eternal war, such fuel is inexhaustible. The choir may be gathering mass, resonance, self-awareness. It may one day speak not in song, but with will. Whispers in the Black Librarium suggest that the Ordo has already identified psychosignatures in some choir events that hint at pattern recognition, as if the song is learning its audience. During the Charon Velt incident, where an entire mining moon erupted in symphonic combustion, seers noted a progression in the frequencies, a repeating motif. One inquisitorial choir mystic even postulated that the choir might be testing different emotional modes, not merely destroying, but auditioning, seeking the perfect chord of obliteration and ecstasy, a process of self-definition through apocalyptic experimentation. What further feeds this terror is the increasing frequency of choir manifestations. They are no longer separated by centuries or isolated to the deep void. Incursions have begun to occur in more populated systems, nearer to major warp routes. Some psychers believe this is evidence of gravitational pull, that the choir, like a sun forming from a gas cloud, is drawing its fragments inward. A coalescence, the becoming of a whole. If so, the Imperium may be witnessing the slow emergence of a new warp god, sung into existence by the galaxy's agony. Radical demonologists have even given it a name, whispered only in void tongue and scrawled in soot: Velarith, the pyre-born cantor, a theoretical entity still formless, defined only by resonance and sacrifice. These same heretics speak of a possible ascension, a moment when the choir ceases to echo and becomes voice, and in that instant, all within earshot will not merely burn, but become its first choir. What would such a being desire? Not power, for it already wields the hearts of the dying. Not dominion, for it does not seek worship. Its cults worship not to serve, but to participate. The demonic hypothesis paints a terrifying truth, that this thing wants only one thing: to be heard, to spread until every mind holds a note of its song, and every star system becomes a verse in its area of ruin. A god of requiems, not conquests. To the Inquisition, such a being is unthinkable, not for its power, but for its inevitability. Because in a galaxy where hope dies daily and entire civilizations burn without remembrance, the warp will remember, and the warp, when it remembers enough, begins to sing. They appear when the song is near, robed in ash-gray vestments, their faces veiled in cinders, their voices never raised above a whisper yet always heard. They are called many things: harmonists of ruin, ashwalkers, or simply the Black Choir. But to those who study forbidden psalms and trace the movements of the choir of Cinder, they are its heralds, the first to hear, and perhaps the first to sing. No one knows where they come from. They do not travel by ship or warp gate, nor do they broadcast their presence. They are simply there, arriving shortly before or during choir incursions, appearing on world after world like the flicker of flame before the blaze. And when they arrive, they do not speak, fight, or proselytize. They listen. They gather in places of acoustics, cathedrals, amphitheaters, burnt halls, even natural canyons. Always they stand in perfect geometric formations, heads bowed, cloaks fluttering as if moved by an invisible breeze. And then they sing. Their voices are nothing like human sound. Witnesses describe it as a harmonic resonance that causes glass to shiver and blood to hum. It enters the ear like melody, but it exits the body like fire. The song they sing is not the choir itself, but a mimicry, a reflection, the prelude. In these moments, atmospheric sensors detect shifts in pressure that do not conform to any known meteorological pattern. Electrical storms begin, machines stutter, Vox signals collapse into silence or untranslatable harmony. And then the choir comes. The Black Choir are not demons, though some have called them that. They bleed when wounded, but the blood is black and smolders like coal. They vanish when struck, dissolving into harmonic dust. Some believe they are psychic constructs, warp echoes given form by the approach of the true choir. Others say they are mortals transformed, devotees who gave themselves so wholly to the song that their flesh was rewritten into resonance. A few theories suggest they are extensions of the choir itself, proto-matter avatars sent ahead to harmonize the conditions for arrival. The Inquisition has captured several over the centuries, though never for long. One, known only as Subject Canticle 0, was detained in a null chamber aboard the black ship Absolution Pyre. It never spoke, but during the night cycles, the walls of its chamber began to pulse with sonic energy, forming melodic patterns that induced seizures in the crew. Even isolated, even restrained, it sang. Eventually, the subject imploded in a burst of harmonic energy that rendered the ship's Geller field inert. Absolution Pyre never returned from its next warp jump. Despite the dangers, some radical factions within the Adeptus Astra Telepathica and Ordo Malleus have attempted communion. They believe the Black Choir may hold keys to understanding, even controlling, the phenomenon. These experiments have universally ended in tragedy. Test subjects exposed to the Black Choir's presence exhibit spontaneous memory overwrite, reciting lives they never lived, grieving losses they never experienced. Some try to sing the song themselves. Those that succeed combust. Those that fail scream for days before silence claims them. Even more unsettling are the reports that some members of the ecclesiarchy, particularly those of the more esoteric sects, have begun adopting Black Choir iconography. They wear ash gray during funerary rites. They chant harmonic psalms in recessional tones. They do not claim allegiance, but something in their eyes, something deep and burning, suggests otherwise. Whether this is infiltration or imitation remains unclear. But the result is the same. The choir's heralds are spreading. The harbingers do not bring the choir. They are not its cause. They are its echo made flesh. They exist because the song is coming. They walk the ashes of burned worlds and hum the notes of endings yet to be sung. When they appear, it is already too late. For they are not messengers of doom. They are doom rehearsed. Among those who travel the immaterium regularly, there exists a silence so deliberate it is deafening, a silence not of ignorance but of terror. This is the silence of the Navigators when it comes to the choir of Cinder. These mutated heirs of the Navigator houses, blessed and cursed with the third eye of warp sight, are uniquely attuned to the currents and dissonances of the Empyrean, and it is precisely because of this sensitivity that they do not speak of the choir, not in open conclaves, not in private logs, not even in dreams. There are stories whispered among lower-deck voidsmen and drunken crew on long-haul freighters of navigators falling into fugue states mid-transit, staring unblinking into the warp for hours as their ships drifted perilously off course. When questioned if they recovered at all, they would utter phrases like, "The sorrow sings true," or "There was no direction, only descent." Some reports mention instances where the navigator's third eye wept black tears or emitted low-pitched harmonics that caused nearby Geller field stabilizers to flicker. The greatest fear among the navigator houses is not demonic possession. They have safeguards against that. Nor is it warp beasts or storm. It is resonance, a specific frequency of psychic vibration that, when encountered, causes irreparable disruption to their perception of the Astronomicon. For those who navigate by its light, the choir presents a distortion so profound it twists the light itself. They describe seeing the Emperor's beacon not as a star, but as a dying sun screaming in song. They cannot navigate through it. They cannot navigate around it. They must flee or fall. There have been instances, sealed by the Navis Nobilite, of entire houses falling into decline after an encounter. The House of Virellum, once a rising star among the Navis inner circles, collapsed in a single generation. All their navigators either suicided or vanished into the warp during uncharted jumps. Their last matriarch reportedly burned herself alive while intoning a melody no mortal choir could replicate. Her servants found her humming softly even as her flesh became cinder. Her last words, "I found the other son." Some among the Ordo Malleus believe the navigator's silence is more than fear, that it is pact. A psychic non-aggression clause sealed not with demons, but with the warp itself. That if they do not acknowledge the choir will not see them. If this is true, it paints a terrifying picture, that the choir is aware of those who can map its shape, and that it punishes the act of observation. A sentient resonance that culls perception itself, the warp equivalent of anti-cognition. Because of this, many navigators have taken to altering their sensory pathways, reinforcing their third eye with rare minerals and psionic null silk to dampen harmonics. Others undergo psychic tattooing, ritual scarring over their eyes and ears with cryptosonic runes to shield against the choir's influence. But even with such measures, they remain vulnerable. Navigators who encounter the choir more than once begin to lose more than sanity. They lose navigation. Entire warp routes vanish from their minds. Star maps crumble into soot. It is as though the choir sings them out of relevance, unmaking their psychic link to reality itself. The silence among the navigator houses is not a conspiracy. It is survival. To name the choir is to draw its attention. To study it is to invite it. And for those whose minds are already half in the warp, whose vision bleeds across the folds of space and nightmare, the choir is not anomaly. It is predator, and it does not hunt in haste. It waits. It listens. And when it hears someone trying to chart its path, it begins to sing. They call them ghost ships, but there is nothing spectral about the horror that clings to their hulls. These are vessels that entered the warp, singing and emerged screaming, or worse, still singing. The choir of Cinder does not simply haunt planets. It moves through void-faring vessels, slipping into the cracks of reality, echoing through the hulls of ships that dare cross its path. Among void-born communities and rogue trader clans, entire subcultures exist around the lore of these cursed vessels, each tale darker than the last. Take the Virelia Indomitus, a cargo hauler of moderate size, lost for 5 years before reappearing in the outer reaches of the Farnax cluster. Its crew was gone. No signs of violence, no damage to the ship. But the walls were warm to the touch, etched with strange musical notations in what appeared to be blood and soot. Every cogitator hummed the same 3-note motif, endlessly looping, a motif later matched to fragments of choir resonance. The Mechanicus tech adept who attempted to shut down the Vox array began singing in binary, tears of fire rolling down his cheeks before he collapsed into ash mid-sentence. Or the case of the Veritas Oblique, an Imperial Navy escort ship that deviated from its escort route after receiving a false emergency vox. The last message from its bridge officer before transmission ceased was a single chilling phrase: "They're harmonizing the walls." It drifted silently into an asteroid field and was obliterated, but salvage teams found pieces of its hull inscribed with choral lyrics in High Gothic, none matching any known hymnals. Scholars believe it was an attempt by the ship itself to join in the choir, the structure singing even as it died. More terrifying still are the living testimonies. One such account comes from a former astropath named Orvis Don, once a member of a black ship's communications choir. His team intercepted what they believed was a distress call, melodic, sorrowful, and layered in multi-voxel harmonics. Upon decoding, they discovered the message was a song that described their own ship, its crew, and its recent warp jump. It was being sung from a point several hours ahead of them, as if time itself was singing their future. Minutes later, 3 psychers died screaming, their heads bursting into flame in perfect harmony. The choir master attempted to end the transmission. He sang himself into silence. The choir's presence on ships is often first detected through subtle signs: auto-hymnals playing tunes no one remembers uploading, cogitators flickering in time with phantom rhythms, corridors echoing steps that match no crew pattern. Some describe seeing their own reflections moving out of sync, mouthing silent lyrics. In some cases, entire decks become harmonically unstable, vibrating at frequencies that make flesh feel like wax, memories slip like oil through the fingers. Ships that pass through these harmonic zones emerge permanently altered, not just in damage, but in spirit. Machine spirits refuse to obey. Auspex ghosts flood systems. Navigation data loops like broken music. One particularly chilling case involves the St. Elvarius Path, a missionary vessel. Its final vox log was a confessional, a missionary sobbing, claiming the choir had sung her unborn child into existence, a child she could feel moving within, though she was never pregnant. When boarding crews arrived, they found the vessel empty, save for a single bundle in the chapel crib, a mass of cinders that emitted harmonic weeping until removed from the warp and incinerated. Not all ships are destroyed. Some become carriers. Vessels like the Ash Benediction or the Refrain of Tears are said to bear the choir's echo within their hulls indefinitely. They cannot be silenced. They drift between stars, sometimes appearing as phantom contacts on long-range auspex, singing their location into the void like cursed lighthouses. The Imperium does not chase these ships. It quarantines their star charts. It burns their names from registries. Because to pursue them is to listen, and to listen is to join the song. There are few threats the Inquisition fears more than knowledge itself. Not demons, not witches, not heretics, but the ideas that make them. And so it is with the Choir of Cinder, whose very name now sits among the most fiercely redacted topics in the entire Imperium. Every record that bears its harmonics is burned. Every scholar who questions its reality disappears. Every song that even echoes its cadences is drowned beneath the weight of official silence. The Imperium does not deny the choir. It refuses to allow it to be known. The Scholam Progenium, the harsh cradle of future commissars, inquisitors, and administratum elite, enforces a strict ban on anything resembling harmonic theory, alternative psychic resonance studies, or musicological exploration beyond state-approved hymnals. Once, the study of sonic warfare and psychoacoustic manipulation was a minor branch of sanctioned learning. Now it is a death sentence. Any attempt to teach, learn, or even speak of harmonic anomalies is considered immediate grounds for censure and mind scrub. Instructors who fail to report such curiosities face worse: soul-scouring interrogations or silence by blade. Yet the very act of suppressing the choir has only made it more seductive. Within the dark corners of scolums and libraria, among the gifted and the curious, the choir has become a myth, a forbidden melody passed in secret among the desperate and the daring. They do not sing it aloud, that would be madness, but they copy fragments, hum bars in empty dormitories, and sketch the curves of its waveform on hidden data slates. The most daring synthesize echoes in secret cogitators, attempting to replicate the song structure using artificial intelligence bound under dozens of machine curses. Some succeed, most die. A notable case emerged from the Ophelian Progenium crypta, where 3 students were found combusted in their private study cell, each reduced to blackened bone arranged in the shape of a treble clef. Their Vox recorder, found miraculously intact, captured a low humming layered in 5 voices, none of which belonged to the victims. The file was reviewed by a Lex mechanic assigned to decipher heretical code. He immolated within 17 seconds of playback. The file was classified under Inquisitorial Vault Protocol Sigma Burn, and all staff involved were executed under charges of passive contamination. This paradox lies at the heart of the choir's cultural footprint. The more it is hidden, the more it is sought. The Imperium is a place where ignorance is survival, but curiosity never dies, especially not among those raised to question, to analyze, to lead. The Schola Progenium trains inquisitors to sniff out heresy, and thus breeds the exact minds most likely to hear the forbidden harmony in the silence. Inquisitors themselves have been caught hoarding fragments of choir data, some under the justification of study, others under less clear motives. In the hallowed Black Vaults, entire choir-proof archives are maintained, rooms wrapped in acoustic null fields and inscribed with sigils that bend sound into oblivion. Even among the Adepta Sororitas, tensions rise. The Order of the Shrouded Flame, a cloister of militant nuns with a penchant for music-based rituals, was quietly dissolved after several members began composing divine counter-hymns, liturgical pieces meant to harmonize with what they called the fire within the silence. An internal war broke out within the Order when a faction began to claim that these harmonies were gifts from the Emperor himself, warning of a coming requiem in which only those who had learned the choir's cadence could survive. The Inquisition's response has become increasingly draconian. Planets with known choir activity are quarantined and, more often than not, sterilized. Choir-affiliated records are purged with fire, then fire again, then erased from time through technosorcery so forbidden that even the mention of its rites is a crime. Choir investigation units operate in teams of 1, never more, to prevent harmonic contamination. Any field agent who collects sound samples is immediately placed under a 30-day purity lockdown, during which they must not speak, hear, or be exposed to music of any kind. But despite all this, the choir grows louder, not just in the warp, but in the minds of those who know, because the Imperium cannot suppress music forever. The harder it tries to drown the choir's voice, the more people hear it in the quiet that follows. And in those moments, in the breathless stillness between verses of hymnals, in the hush before a cathedral's first bell toll, a single note sometimes lingers, not spoken, not recorded, just felt. And that is how the choir survives. There is a star that does not burn like others. It does not shine with the golden blaze of soul, nor does it radiate the baleful energy of a dying nova. It glows red and cold, wrapped in a cloud of crystalline debris that twinkles not with light, but with resonance. They call it the Cinder Star, a name spoken in reverent whispers among void singers, mad psychers, and those few navigators brave enough to trace myth through the warp routes forbidden. To many, it is the birthplace of the choir of Cinder, or perhaps its resting place. Or worse, its cathedral. Located at the heart of an uncharted region within the Vulca Drift, the Cinder Star is a black dwarf suspended within an accretion ring of mineralized ice and dust. Yet the ring does not orbit. It pulses, slowly, rhythmically, as if responding to a frequency no sensor can register. Instruments placed near it begin to sing. Not beep, not chime. Sing. Pitch-perfect harmony, yet no pattern ever repeats. Even cogitators designed for noise filtration cannot endure long. They loop, overheat, and eventually fall silent. Not shut down, silent. The Mechanicus attempted to construct an observation station in its orbit during the Fifth Thalmoric expansion. The structure was never completed. Within 36 hours of arrival, the servitors began speaking in High Gothic verse. The engine seers wept ash, and the entire site was consumed in a micro-flare that emitted no heat, only sound, a perfect C major triad that echoed through the void for 8 minutes before fading. No debris was found, only a single servo skull, still broadcasting the sound of children singing in harmony, their words unintelligible but their grief unmistakable. It is not merely the star that sings. The region around the Cinder Star defies traditional warp physics. Ships entering the zone experience overlapping timelines, recursive memory loops, and shared hallucinations of planetary immolation. Multiple crews have reported seeing a world that no longer exists, a planet of glass plains, black spires, and cathedrals burning while choirs of flame sang in mourning. The planet does not appear on any chart. Some believe it is a memory burned into the warp itself, the choir's true birthplace, erased from reality but preserved in echo. Among the most radical theories is that the Cinder Star is not a star at all, but a warp anchor, a point where the immaterium and real space are fused by sorrow. A site of such profound psychic trauma that it birthed a resonance vortex, one that draws sound and grief from every corner of the galaxy. In this vision, the choir is not a roaming entity, but a song trying to return home. And the Cinder Star is that home, the center of the melody, the eye of the requiem. Even the Inquisition dares not approach it directly. One attempt by a Death Watch kill team ended with all members returned in cryostasis, unresponsive, their neural pathways looping a single harmonic phrase. The silence knows us now. Their armor was melted not by heat, but by sympathetic vibration. Their weapons were intact. Their minds were not. Still, pilgrims come, not in sanctioned fleets, but in scavenged haulers and rogue vessels, often bearing marks of the ashen saints or unknown cults. They drift into the region and vanish, or worse, they return humming, smiling, speaking in tongues made of chord progressions and melancholic cadences. Some attempt to describe what they saw. They speak of a choir that is not made of people, but of moments. Memories that scream and sing. Cathedrals made of fossilized regret. Bells that ring in frequencies which shatter not stone but certainty. The Cinder Star remains unclaimed, unnamed by any official chart. Even the Astronomicon seems to dim in its vicinity, flickering like a candle in a storm. Perhaps that is the truth of it, that this is not merely a location, but a conclusion. A place where the warp pauses, where time breathes in before it sighs out its final verse. The choir may have begun here, or it may be ending here, or perhaps the difference does not matter, because the song still waits, and when the last note is sung, it will echo from the Cinder Star and burn across the galaxy like a funeral dirge for all things. It's not the fire that terrifies us. It's not even the song. It's what it means. The choir of Cinder is more than a warp echo, more than a demonic anomaly, more than an apocalyptic chorus. It is a mirror, a resonant reflection of the galaxy's collective grief. Its melody isn't alien. It's ours. Every note is shaped by a scream no one heard, every harmony built from the sigh of a dying world, every crescendo birthed in the collapse of hope. That's why it hurts. That's why it calls to us. The Imperium is a place where suffering is systemic, institutionalized, weaponized. Planets are strip-mined not only of resources but of joy. Generations live and die without ever seeing the sun. Entire populations are erased in a moment to maintain supply chains. Faith is forged in pain. Obedience is extracted through fear. And in this vast machinery of despair, the choir is the byproduct, the condensation of collective trauma, transformed into something beautiful and unbearable, like a requiem sung by the bones of the innocent. Perhaps the most horrifying truth is that the choir doesn't kill indiscriminately. It harmonizes, it selects, it enters only those places where its presence can be understood, if not cognitively, then emotionally. The choir doesn't visit pristine forge worlds where the silence of routine is uninterrupted. It haunts ruins, derelicts, graveyards of meaning, places where death had meaning and that meaning wasn't preserved. The choir is grief with nowhere to go, and so it becomes music, because music is the only language left for what we've forgotten how to mourn. This is what the Inquisition fears. Not just that the choir exists, but that it resonates with us. That it's not alien, but familiar. That it is not an enemy, but an expression. What happens when the people of the Imperium begin to recognize the song? When they hear it not as an anomaly, but as justice, as remembrance? The Ashen Saints may be mad, but their madness is born from understanding. They do not seek death. They seek meaning through fire. They seek an end that is not silence, but symphony. The choir may never be classified, never fully understood, but its message grows louder with each appearance. It's not a threat. It's a verdict. A final statement on a species that has turned pain into ritual, sacrifice into routine. The choir is asking us, no, forcing us, to feel it, to remember what we lost and why we lost it. It is the sound of a galaxy screaming into its own reflection, and finally hearing the echo. And if that is true, then what comes next is not war, nor conquest, nor salvation. It is the final chorus. The last note sung before the curtain of this grimdark stage falls. The choir of Cinder is not coming. It's already here. If you found this transmission, if you've heard even a whisper of the choir, do not run, do not fight, do not pray. Listen and remember. Thank you for walking with us through this grim, resonant tale. If you found value in these dark echoes, subscribe to the channel. There are more mysteries to uncover and more songs to hear in the vast silence of the void.